The volcanic ash beneath Sakai's aircraft quivered with heat waves. Morning sun blazed across Iwo Jima's runway, his weathered hands wrapped around the control stick of the Mitsubishi A6M50. Those same hands had destroyed more enemy fighters than most aviators would witness in their entire careers. Beyond his canopy lay the eastern horizon. Soon, it would fill with American carrier planes, not the orderly formations from 3 years past. These would arrive as massive swarms, dark clouds that blocked out sunlight itself. Minutes earlier, he had spoken words to another pilot, words that would echo through aviation history like a death knell. "We shot them down every week, but they came by dozens, always by dozens." Sakai understood something the younger pilots around him could not grasp. They were watching mathematical certainty unfold. Individual heroism meant nothing against production statistics. 600 miles eastward, Task Force 58 prepared its morning assault. 15 fleet carriers launched aircraft in perfect synchronization. 450 planes rose from their decks in coordinated waves. Just 1 week before, the Americans had lost 89 aircraft. This morning they launched 5 times that number without concern. Ready rooms aboard USS Essex, USS Yorktown, and USS Lexington buzzed with activity. Fresh pilots with 400 training hours prepared for first combat missions. Behind them stood assembly lines producing 3 new Hellcats for every plane lost. The arithmetic of destruction was already calculated. America's factories would manufacture 96,318 aircraft in 1944 alone. More than Japan had built since the war began. This moment of mathematical impossibility traced back 16 years, back to humid summer days in 1928. A teenage Saburo Sakai had stood before Sasebo Naval Base gates then. Born August 25, 1916, in Saga Prefecture. 3rd child among 8 in an impoverished farming family. Their bloodline descended from samurai, but poverty offered no future beyond rice fields and debt. At 16, he enlisted in the Imperial Japanese Navy. Escape was his only option. Naval aviation selection was deliberately merciless. 1,500 applicants entered Sakai's class at Tsuchiura Naval Aviation School in 1937. Only 70 would earn wings. The washout rate exceeded 95% by design. Elite pilots mattered more than adequate ones. Physical trials broke bones and spirits regularly. Candidates hung from iron bars until hands bled raw. They swam in January seas until hypothermia set in. Aerobatic practice continued until they vomited. Then more practice followed. November 27, 1937. Sakai graduated 11th in his class. 650 flight hours completed. American training programs 5 years later would consider this impossible. Posted to the 12th Kokutai Air Group, he tasted combat over China in 1938, flying the Mitsubishi A5M against Chinese pilots in obsolete biplanes. His first kill came October 5, 1938, near Hankow. A Soviet-built Polikarpov I-16 burst into flames. 2 seconds of 7.7mm machine gun fire did the job. By May 1941, Sakai had joined the elite Tainan Kokutai on Formosa. 800 flight hours logged, 4 confirmed victories recorded. The Tainan Air Group represented Japanese naval aviation's pinnacle. Legendary pilots filled its ranks. Hiroshi Nishizawa would claim 87 victories before death. Toshio Ota with 34 kills. Masahaki Shimakawa with 27. These men believed themselves inheritors of samurai tradition. Aerial warriors whose skill would overcome any material disadvantage. December 8, 1941, brought their first indication of what lay ahead. December 7th across the international date line. Sakai participated in the Clark Field attack in the Philippines, flying escort for 54 G-4M bombers. Zeros caught Americans completely unprepared. 9 hours of warning after Pearl Harbor meant nothing. Sakai destroyed a P-40 Warhawk, watched the American fighter disintegrate under cannon fire. On the ground below, neat rows of B-17 flying fortresses burned. The scene resembled a forest fire. What struck Sakai wasn't the easy victory. It was the sheer number of destroyed aircraft. Over 100 American planes eliminated in a single morning. If Americans could afford leaving so many aircraft exposed after receiving war warnings, what reserves did they possess? Early 1942 seemed to validate Japanese confidence. Quality over quantity appeared correct. February 3rd, flying from newly captured Rabaul Base, Sakai engaged in combat over Bougainville. The Zero's turning ability proved superior against American Wildcats that couldn't match its maneuverability. These halcyon days suggested kill ratios justified Japan's training philosophy. Battle of the Java Sea, February 27th. Sakai's squadron destroyed multiple Allied aircraft while losing handful of Zeros. Over Port Darwin, February 19th. The Tainan Kokutai claimed numerous victories against minimal losses. Individual Japanese pilots shot down multiple enemy aircraft per engagement, but troubling patterns emerged for those willing to see them. After shooting down a B-17 in early 1942, Sakai noted the bomber's incredible damage absorption. The American aircraft had taken punishment that should have destroyed it instantly. More disturbing was its defensive fire, accurate and sustained throughout the attack. Gunners continued shooting even as flames engulfed the fuselage. Replacement rates proved even more disturbing. Allied squadrons lost aircraft. New planes appeared within days. Japanese losses took weeks to replace from homeland factories. The mathematics were simple but ignored. Allies replaced losses faster than Japan could inflict them. Lieutenant Commander Tadashi Nakajima, Tainan Kokutai's operations officer, privately calculated the odds. At current loss rates versus American production estimates, Japan needed 10-to-1 kill ratios just to maintain parity by 1944. They were achieving 3-to-1 at best. August 7, 1942. 05:30 hours. Scramble alarms shrieked across Rabaul Lakunai airfield. Pilots ran to their aircraft. American forces had invaded Guadalcanal and Tulagi. Complete surprise caught the Japanese unprepared. Sakai strapped into his Zero, one of 18 fighters assigned to escort 27 G-4M bombers. The journey to Guadalcanal stretched 560 nautical miles, the longest fighter mission ever attempted at that time. 4 hours of flying tested human endurance to its limits. Sakai held formation over the Solomon Sea. Fuel consumption required surgical precision. The slightest excess throttle or unnecessary maneuver meant ditching in shark-infested waters. Behind him, rookie pilots struggled to maintain position. Their fuel gauges dropped faster than calculated. Many had graduated flight school just weeks earlier. 15 hours. They arrived over Guadalcanal. The invasion fleet defied comprehension. Ships covered the ocean as far as visibility allowed. I counted over 70 vessels, including what appeared to be 6 aircraft carriers, Sakai would write in his autobiography, Samurai. Reality was 82 Allied ships. 3 fleet carriers, Enterprise, Saratoga, and Wasp, launched continuous fighter patrols. The ensuing battle became legendary in aviation history. Sakai shot down a dauntless dive bomber, then engaged Lieutenant James "Pug" Sutherland's Wildcat from VF-5 off Saratoga. For nearly 20 minutes, 2 fighters twisted through the sky. Classical dogfight pushed both aircraft to their limits. Sutherland, an experienced aviator with over 500 combat hours, matched Sakai maneuver for maneuver. Ammunition exhaustion finally forced disengagement, but the day's most significant moment came at 1450. Sakai spotted what appeared to be 8 Wildcat fighters, loose formation 8,000 feet below. Rolling into diving attack from their 6 o'clock blind spot, he closed to 50 meters before realizing his fatal error. These weren't fighters, SBD Dauntless dive bombers with rear gunners. Aviation Machinist's Mate Second Class Harold Lou Jones, gunner in Lieutenant Dudley Adams's Dauntless from VF-5, opened fire. Twin 30 caliber Browning machine guns blazed with devastating accuracy. Bullets struck Sakai's aircraft with precision. One round penetrated his skull above the right eye, destroyed the eye instantly. Another creased his skull, causing partial paralysis on his left side. Blood streamed into his remaining eye, effectively blinded him. What followed ranks among aviation history's most remarkable feats of airmanship. Semi-conscious, partially paralyzed, unable to see clearly, Sakai flew 560 nautical miles back to Rabaul. Volcanic smoke plumes provided his only navigation reference. 4 hours and 47 minutes of drifting in and out of consciousness. Several times he nearly inverted the aircraft into the ocean. He landed at Rabaul at 1800 hours. Less than 10 liters of fuel remained. Mission statistics told the real story. Japan lost 23 aircraft and crews. Americans lost fewer planes and rescued most downed pilots. While Japan struggled replacing 24 aircraft, American carriers already received new planes, flown directly from West Coast factories. While Sakai recovered in naval hospitals over 8 months, the air war ground through Japanese naval aviation like a mechanical thresher. Statistics from those months reveal inexorable mathematics that would doom Japan's aviation. Between August 1942 and February 1943, the Japanese Navy lost nearly 900 aircraft in the Solomons. Each aircraft represented a pilot with minimum 500 flight hours. Many had over 1,000 hours. These men embodied years of training investment Japan could not repeat. Pilot training schools graduated only 100 pilots monthly. These graduates received progressively fewer training hours, down to 400 hours by early 1943. Americans graduated 2,500 naval aviators monthly from Pensacola alone. Additional thousands came from Corpus Christi, Jacksonville, and San Diego. Each American pilot received minimum 400 flight hours, including 100 hours in operational aircraft types. Combat zone integration placed them in squadrons with experienced pilots who mentored newcomers through first missions. Commander Minoru Genda, architect of Pearl Harbor attack, visited Guadalcanal in October 1942. What he found appalled him. In a report classified Most Secret and delivered personally to Admiral Yamamoto, he wrote, "We are literally wearing away our naval aviation strength in a war of attrition we cannot win. The enemy replaces losses immediately. We cannot replace them at all." Japanese tried compensating through tactical innovation. Extended operations range from Rabaul by establishing forward bases, coordinated massive fighter sweeps, developed new tactics. None of it mattered against overwhelming numbers. Production differentials reflected stunning industrial mismatch. In 1940, before entering war, United States produced 12,800 military aircraft. Japan, already 3 years into China War, managed only 4,768. American production was peacetime levels. Japan was already at maximum capacity. Pearl Harbor transformed American industry overnight. Ford Motor Company's Willow Run plant in Michigan hadn't existed in 1940. By 1944, it produced one B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes. Single factory floor space exceeded all Japanese aircraft manufacturing facilities combined. Peak production employed 42,000 workers. They assembled bombers from 1,550,000 parts. North American aviation produced over 15,000 P-51 Mustangs, each superior to the Zero in speed, firepower, armor, and high-altitude performance. Grumman manufactured 12,275 F-6F Hellcats in just 30 months, aircraft specifically designed to counter the Zero. The airplane that would destroy more Japanese aircraft than any other was produced at rates exceeding dozen per day. Disparity extended beyond numbers to technological advancement. While Japan struggled maintaining production of increasingly obsolete Zeros, America introduced entirely new aircraft types quarterly. F-4U Corsair could outrun Zero by 80 miles per hour. P-38 Lightning, with twin engines and devastating firepower, attacked from altitudes where Zero engines struggled. By mid-1943, American aircraft engines produced 2,000 horsepower, compared to Zero's 1,130. American fighters carried armor plating. Zero had none. American planes used high-octane fuel, providing significantly more power than Japan's aviation gasoline. Sakai returned to limited duty June 1943. Right eye permanently destroyed. Depth perception compromised. Posted to Toyohashi Air Base as instructor, he witnessed firsthand the collapse of Japanese pilot training standards. New students arrived from primary training with 150 flight hours, less than American pilots received before touching combat aircraft. "We were supposed to make fighter pilots out of these children in 3 months," Sakai recalled in 1985 interview. "They could barely land without crashing. We were sending them to die, nothing more." Training aircraft themselves revealed resource crisis. Advanced trainers were worn-out Type 93s from China War, patched and repatched until they barely flew. Fuel allocations permitted each student only 60 hours flight time in operational training phase. No spare parts existed. Damaged trainers were cannibalized to keep others flying. Instructor cadre consisted largely of wounded veterans like Sakai, men who should have been invalided out, but whom Japan could not afford to lose. These damaged men tried passing knowledge to boys who would never live long enough to use it. Statistics from late 1943 training classes tell the story. Of graduates sent to combat zones, majority were dead within 6 months. Despite his injuries, Sakai volunteered returning to combat June 1944. American invasion of Marianas threatened bringing B-29 bombers within range of Japanese homeland. Every available pilot was needed, including half-blind veterans who belonged in hospitals. Sakai was assigned to Yokosuka Kokutai and deployed to Iwo Jima June 24, 1944. Arriving midst what Americans called Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Single day, June 19th, Japanese naval aviation lost 315 aircraft and pilots. Americans lost 29 planes and recovered most pilots. On his first combat mission from Iwo Jima, June 24th, Sakai encountered new reality of American air power. Leading section of 4 Zeros on interception mission, he found not manageable formations of 1942. Incoming strike of over 200 aircraft. Hellcats, Avengers, and Dauntlesses in perfectly coordinated waves. The sky was black with them, he told historian Henry Sakida in 1994. They came in layers, fighters on top, dive bombers in middle, torpedo planes below. For everyone we engaged, 5 more appeared. Ensuing combat left Sakai alone against 15 F-6F Hellcats. Using every trick learned through years of flying, he survived 20-minute engagement that would have killed any pilot with less experience. Used clouds for cover. Executed snap rolls at edge of structural failure. Once escaped by diving so close to ocean that spray covered his canopy. He claimed one Hellcat possibly damaged, but knew it meant nothing. Americans could afford losing dozens. Mathematics of battle were stark. Japan deployed 450 aircraft to Marianas Battle and lost 480, including reinforcements in 3 days. Task Force 58 launched nearly 1,000 sorties June 19th alone, lost only 29 aircraft while destroying 2/3 of Japanese naval aviation in single afternoon. By October 1944, when Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi formally organized special attack units, kamikaze, at Mabalacat in Philippines, decision reflected not fanaticism but mathematical inevitability. Sakai understood brutal logic with clarity. In 1998 interview, Sakai explained, "You must understand, we had boys with 30 hours flight time going up against Americans with 300 hours. They couldn't even find enemy, much less shoot them down. If they flew normally, they died achieving nothing. If they flew kamikaze, they might at least damage ship. It was simple arithmetic." Training pipeline had completely collapsed. Yokoren, Naval Aviator Preparatory Course, pushed through students in 90 days, less than 100 flight hours total. Many had never fired guns in flight. Ammunition was too precious for gunnery practice. They couldn't navigate beyond visual range of land. They certainly couldn't dogfight. American response was overwhelming. Task Force 38 could deploy 1,200 aircraft from 17 fleet carriers plus 8 light carriers. These were replaced continuously. When air groups suffered casualties, they rotated stateside and replaced with fresh squadrons. Japanese units fought until annihilated. Sakai's final combat missions came during Homeland Defense in 1945. Now flying from Yokosuka Naval Air Station near Tokyo, he participated in interception missions against B-29 raids and later against carrier strikes. What he witnessed defied description. During Operation Tengo, defense of Okinawa, April 1945, Japan launched massive kamikaze attacks against American invasion fleet. American fleet had perfected defense by this point. Radar-directed 5-inch guns opened fire at 10,000 yards. 40mm Bofors guns engaged at 4,000 yards. 20mm Oerlikon guns created final barrier at 2,000 yards. New proximity-fused shells exploded automatically near aircraft. Combat air patrols of 50 or more Hellcats orbited at varying altitudes, vectored by radar to intercept incoming raids 50 miles from fleet. "We would start with 100 aircraft," Sakai recalled. "By time we reached American fleet, perhaps 20 were left. Of those, maybe 1 or 2 would actually hit ship, usually destroyer on radar picket duty. Americans had so many ships that losing destroyer meant nothing to them." Statistics from Okinawa are staggering. Japan launched 1,465 kamikaze sorties and lost over 1,000 aircraft in conventional attacks. They sank 36 American ships and damaged 368. But Task Force 58 remained fully operational throughout, launched 40,000 combat sorties. For every American ship sunk, Japan lost 60 aircraft and pilots. Sakai's last combat mission occurred early August 1945. Days before Japan's surrender. Leading Flight of Zeros from Yokosuka, he was ordered to intercept B-32 Dominator bombers photographing Tokyo. Mission encapsulated war's futility. Obsolete fighters against newest American bomber. Itself backup design because America could afford redundancy in everything. Interception failed. B-32s flew too high and too fast for Zeros to catch. Sakai could only watch as they photographed Japanese cities already reduced to ash. War was already over. Missions were merely documenting devastation. Production statistics tell complete story of Japan's defeat in air. Total war production. United States 295,959 aircraft, including 99,465 fighters. Japan 76,320 aircraft, including 30,447 fighters. United States produced more aircraft in 1944 alone, 96,318, than Japan manufactured during entire war. American fighter production alone exceeded total Japanese aircraft production of all types. Numbers tell only part of story. American aircraft in 1945 were technological generations ahead of 1941 predecessors. P-51D Mustang could fly at 437 miles per hour compared to Zero's 331 miles per hour. F-4U-4 Corsair had climb rate of 4,500 feet per minute versus Zero's 3,100. Japanese aircraft showed minimal advancement. A6M5 that Sakai flew in 1944 was barely different from A6M2 of 1941, slightly faster but still unarmored, still using same cannons, still limited by same underpowered engine. Behind every aircraft was pilot. Here, too, mathematics overwhelmed Japan. United States trained 193,440 pilots during World War II, including 60,956 naval aviators. Japan trained approximately 15,000 naval aviators and 25,000 Army pilots total. American pilot training maintained consistent standards throughout war. 400-plus hours before combat. Japanese training hours collapsed progressively, from 700 to 800 hours in 1941 to 50 to 100 hours by 1945. By war's end, American replacement pilots arrived with more flight time than many Japanese instructors. Other Japanese aces corroborated Sakai's observations about American numerical superiority. Hiroshi Nishizawa, Japan's leading ace with 87 claimed victories, told Sakai during last leave October 1944, "It's not like before, Saburo. In 1942, I could fly alone and attack whole squadron. Now they come in groups of 50, 100, 200. There's no room to maneuver, no space to escape. We are drowned in numbers." Nishizawa was killed October 26, 1944. Not in combat, but as passenger in transport plane shot down by Hellcats. His death epitomized late war reality. Japan's greatest ace died unable even to defend himself. Commander Masatake Okumiya provided most analytical assessment in post-war book Zero, written with Jiro Horikoshi. We thought spirit could overcome material disadvantage. We believed one Japanese pilot was worth 3 Americans. Perhaps this was true in 1941. By 1943, Americans had better planes. By 1944, they had better pilots. By 1945, they had such overwhelming numbers that individual quality became irrelevant. Tetsuzo Iwamoto, one of few top aces to survive, reflected, "I shot down Hellcat in morning. That afternoon 3 more appeared. I shot one of those down. Next morning, 10 appeared. How do you fight that? You don't. You simply survive as long as you can." One incident from Sakai's combat career illustrated human dimension often lost in production statistics. February 9, 1942, while strafing airfield in Java, Sakai dove on what appeared to be military transport. As he closed to firing range, He noticed women and children visible through aircraft's windows. Dutch civilians evacuating collapsing Netherlands East Indies. I couldn't fire, Sakai recalled. These were not combatants. They were mothers and children fleeing war. I pulled up and waggled my wings, telling them to go. Dutch pilot, recognizing gesture, waved back. Sakai's wingmen, following his lead, also held fire. Transport escaped to Australia carrying civilians who would have certainly died. This act of mercy revealed complex humanity within killing machine. 40 years later, at aviation reunion in United States, Dutch woman approached Sakai with tears in her eyes. She had been child on that transport. Her survival, and that of her children and grandchildren, stemmed from split-second decision by Japanese pilot to see humans rather than targets. In later years, Sakai became increasingly critical of mythology surrounding Japanese warriors and kamikaze pilots. Speaking at American military academies and aviation museums, he systematically demolished romantic notions about dying for emperor. You want to know what kamikaze pilots thought about while diving at your ships? He asked Naval Academy audience in 1991. Not about emperor, not about honor. They thought about their mothers. They cried for their mothers. I know because I heard their last transmissions. Okasan, Okasan, mother, mother, mother. They were boys, frightened boys, not fanatics. He addressed Bushido code with equal bluntness. Bushido was propaganda for making young men willing to die. Samurai of old fought when they had advantage and retreated when they didn't. They weren't stupid. We were stupid. We fought against mathematics itself and wondered why we lost. His most controversial statement came in joint appearance with Paul Tibbets, pilot of Enola Gay. If Japan had developed atomic bomb first, and I had been ordered to drop it on Los Angeles, I would have done so without hesitation. That's war. America was simply better at war than we were. In 1998 interview, Sakai revealed his anger at Japanese leadership. People ask why we kept fighting when we knew we couldn't win. Ordinary pilots, young boys dying in their planes, they believed propaganda. They thought we were winning until very end. Only senior officers knew truth, and they chose honor through death over shame of surrender. Militarists who started war, they knew America's strength. They had been to America. They saw factories, resources, technology, but they believed Japanese spirit could overcome material disadvantage. They sent us to die for their delusions. Regarding his claimed victories, Sakai was honest about discrepancy between official records and published claims. When American audiences believed he had 64 victories, number invented by ghostwriter Martin Kaiden, Sakai corrected them. Official record shows 28 aerial victories, including shared ones. In war, everyone exaggerates. What matters is not number, but that we survived to tell truth about war. Post-war period brought unexpected reconciliation between former enemies. May 1982, historian Henry Sakeda arranged meeting between Sakai and Harold Lew Jones, gunner who had destroyed Sakai's eye and nearly killed him at Guadalcanal. Meeting at Nimitz Museum could have been awkward or hostile. Instead, it became moment of profound human connection. Sakai brought his flying helmet, still bearing holes from Jones's bullets, and stained with 40-year-old blood. Jones held it with trembling hands, understanding for first-time human cost of his accurate gunnery. I was just doing my job, Jones said quietly. I never thought about man in plane. You were doing your duty, Sakai replied. As was I. We were both young men serving our countries. There is no hatred, only respect. They became friends, corresponding regularly, until Jones's death in 2009. Sakai gave Jones' blood-stained helmet as gift, saying it belonged with man whose skill had ended his career as fighter pilot. What Sakai came to understand and tried explaining to Japanese audiences after war was that American victory came not from courage or skill, qualities both sides possessed, but from systematic superiority in organization, production, and training. American pilot training system exemplified this approach. By 1943, U.S. Navy had established production line system for creating pilots that maintained quality while achieving quantity. 60-week program produced pilots with 400 flight hours minimum, while Japan's collapsing system pushed out pilots with less than 100 hours by 1945. Sakai's famous observation about American planes coming by dozens reflected precise mathematical reality. During major operations, American task forces could surge aircraft in overwhelming waves. Battle of Philippine Sea, June 19, 1944. Japanese launched 373 aircraft in 4 waves. Americans launched 956 sorties from 15 carriers. Result: 315 Japanese aircraft lost, 29 American. Americans achieved what military theorists call numerical overmatch, superiority so overwhelming that tactical excellence becomes irrelevant. When every Japanese pilot faced 5, 10, or 15 opponents, individual skill meant nothing. Sakai spent final decades building bridges between former enemies. He sent his daughter to study at American University, telling her, "Learn English, learn democracy, learn why they won." She later married American Army officer, symbolically uniting former enemies. At air shows and military reunions, Sakai signed autographs alongside American aces, often comparing notes about specific dogfights. Veterans who had tried killing each other 45 years earlier laughed together like old flying buddies. His message to young Japanese was consistent. We lost because we believed our own propaganda. We thought spirit could overcome material reality. America won because they counted correctly. How many planes needed? How many pilots required? How much fuel consumed? They did mathematics. We did mythology. To American audiences, he offered different lesson. You won through production, but production came from freedom. Free workers in free factories outproduced slave labor and regimented workshops. Your strength wasn't just your numbers, but system that created those numbers. Final accounting of Pacific Air War reveals mathematical impossibility Japan faced. Aircraft carriers produced during war. United States 28 fleet carriers, 71 escort carriers. Japan 6 fleet carriers, 4 escort carriers. Pilot training output. United States 60,956 naval aviators. Japan approximately 15,000 naval aviators. Aviation fuel production, 1944, United States 6.5 billion gallons. Japan, 315 million gallons. Every metric told same story. America could lose 10 planes for every Japanese plane and still dominate through sheer numbers. They actually achieved reverse, shooting down multiple Japanese aircraft for every American loss, making conclusion foregone. September 22, 2000, Saburo Sakai attended formal dinner at Atsugi Naval Air Station Officers Club, invited as honored guest by U.S. Navy. At age 84, still sharp and dignified, he sat between American naval officers, sharing stories of aerial combat and post-war reconciliation. During dinner, he spoke about transformation from warrior to peacemaker. "I spent my youth trying to kill Americans. I've spent my old age befriending them." Second task has been more rewarding than first. As evening concluded, young American Naval Aviator Lieutenant Commander William Johnson stood to shake Sakai's hand and thank him for attending. Sakai rose, reached across table, and suddenly stiffened. Handshake was completed, but Sakai collapsed backward, suffering massive heart attack. He died in ambulance racing to Naval Hospital. His last conscious act was reaching out to American naval officer in friendship. Symbolism was lost on no one. Samurai, who had tried so hard to kill Americans, died extending his hand to one in peace. Saburo Sakai's observation that American planes came by dozens, despite Japanese pilots shooting them down every week, captures fundamental truth of industrial warfare. Individual heroism, tactical brilliance, and warrior spirit meant nothing against overwhelming material superiority systematically applied. Numbers tell story. America produced 3.87 times more aircraft than Japan, trained 4.83 times more pilots, produced 20.6 times more aviation fuel, built 9.9 times more aircraft carriers, and still achieved positive kill ratio despite numerical superiority. But Sakai's greater wisdom came from understanding why these numbers existed. In final interview, 3 months before death, he said, "America won because it was free society mobilized for total war. Free workers chose to build planes faster than enslaved laborers in our factories. Free scientists developed better technology than our regimented researchers. Free pilots fought more creatively than our indoctrinated warriors. Dozens of planes that replaced our victories weren't just aluminum and steel. They were products of freedom itself." He paused, then added, "We thought we were fighting for our emperor god. They knew they were fighting for their way of life. That's why they could produce those dozens of planes, train those hundreds of pilots, sustain those thousands of missions. They were defending something worth defending." Final lesson from Saburo Sakai isn't about numbers, but about systems that create them. Japan's military aristocracy believed in quality through spiritual selection, few superior warriors defeating many inferior enemies. America believed in quantity through systematic production, overwhelming force scientifically applied. Samurai faced assembly line, and assembly line won. Not because Americans were braver or more skilled. Sakai proved throughout career that Japanese pilots could match anyone in courage and ability. Assembly line won because it could replace losses faster than samurai could inflict them. Learn from mistakes faster than enemy could exploit them. Adapt to change faster than tradition-bound opponents could respond. When Sakai said, "We shot them down every week, but they came by dozens," he was describing more than aerial combat. He was witnessing death of warrior aristocracy and birth of industrial warfare, where victory went not to best, but to most. In that terrible mathematics, Japan never had chance. Saburo Sakai, warrior, survivor, and ultimately peacemaker, became living witness to that transformation. His life journey from shooting down American planes to shaking hands with American pilots encapsulates greater transformation of Japan itself. From militaristic empire to democratic ally. From warrior state to economic powerhouse. From isolation to integration. Dozens of American planes that overwhelmed him in war became foundation for understanding that led to peace. That handshake at Atsugi, completed as his life ended, sealed reconciliation written in sky over Pacific by young men who fought with everything they had, only to discover everything wasn't enough when faced with inexorable mathematics of American production. Dozens always came. In end, dozens always won.